I came from nothing, but I'ma get something, nigga, you better believe it. I know that I'm down, but I'ma come up, baby, you better believe it.
They're joining us right now to break down all of these developments that we've learned today is former federal prosecutor and legal analyst Nima Rahmani. Thanks so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thanks for having me, Anna. Great to be here.
Of course. So just as this verdict comes out, what was your immediate reaction? How did the jury ultimately come to this conclusion?
Well, this was a very quick deliberation, 3 hours, and I think it's a testament to the strength of the prosecution's case. But frankly, the fact that much of the evidence wasn't in dispute here. I mean, really, there was a question of was Karmelo Anthony shoved with one arm or two? What was the weight difference between him and Austin Metcalf? Was it 50 pounds or 100 pounds? Did they have a right to be in the tent? Was it normal to go into a rival team's tent? But really, it's a question of was his use of force reasonable and proportionate? Because it has to be objectively.
See, that's the problem right there. Was it a show? Was it? I'm thinking they fought him and stuff like that, bro. It's not like it's making me think differently now. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like if I'm fighting life in jail, I'm taking a stand for sure. Like, I'm not about to let these people play on my life. Like, I gotta take the stand and say my side of the story. I feel like everybody that's saying they did something automatically needs to take the stand. Like, it's like I gotta take the stand. My life on the line.
And this applies in every state, not just the state of Texas. You can't bring a proverbial knife to a fist fight. And this wasn't even punching. This was pushing and shoving. And I maintained the whole time that this was...
How you know it was pushing and shoving, though? That's one thing I can't even see. That's why I say he should have took the stand, bro. How we know who we know pushing and shoving and all that? We don't know that. That's he say, she say. He should have said something.
Unnecessary escalation under the circumstances. Stabbing someone in the chest just because you've been shoved is not self-defense under the law because it's not objectively reasonable. You shouldn't have a knife at a track event. I know the defense was arguing that it was a tool and not a weapon, but I don't think that really resonated with the jurors. And of course, the fact that they were sequestered means that they wanted to wrap this up as quickly as possible and get home. So, big win for the prosecution. I think the only chance that the defense had in this case would be if Karmelo Anthony...
Chad, I ain't even just read that at the bottom. It said found guilty.
And if he testified that he believed that he was at imminent risk of death or serious bodily injury, if he was able to convince the jurors that he was genuine in his fear, even though it was unreasonable under Texas state law, that would have reduced murder to manslaughter. And that sentence would have been 2 to 20 years. But when Karmelo Anthony did not take the stand, the jurors were left with really an all or nothing proposition. Was this reasonable? Was it not?
See, that's what I was saying. Like, that's why he should have took the stand for sure. Like, what the hell? Man, that's what I'm saying. Like, because I could see manslaughter, but first degree murder, it's like he premeditated. Like, I don't feel like they should do that to him, but he definitely should have took the stand, though. I was saying that, though. And bring a knife to a fist fight is crazy, though. I can see what they're getting at with that. It don't matter what race you is. You know what I'm saying? Right is right, wrong is wrong. You feel me? So, yeah.
It was not reasonable. There was only one reasonable verdict, and that's guilty of first degree murder.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
And do you think keeping Karmelo Anthony out of the witness box was the right call in this situation?
I do not. And I know he would have been subject to a grueling cross-examination, and I understand why the defense did what they did. Some of his statements did come out during the prosecution's case that, he told Metcalf not to touch him, that he was acting in self-defense. But the conventional wisdom in these cases is if you're going to present a self-defense argument or defense, you have to take the stand. You have to explain to the jurors and look them in the eye why you believe that you would be killed or why you believe that you would suffer serious bodily injury. I don't think there's any reasonable world or Carmelo Anthony thought that he was going to suffer serious bodily injury. There was a lot of other kids there. There were coaches. I know maybe he thought he was going to be jumped. He was surrounded by Metcalf and his twin brother, but nothing had reached the point where he was going to be severely physically assaulted. It was just a push. The response was disproportionate. You don't stab someone in the chest simply because you're pushed. And I think the result would have been the same regardless of the race of the defendant and the victim. Obviously, a lot of people have talked about this all-white jury, and I'm not naive. I mean, the racial overtones in this case, I mean, can't be ignored. You have Black Panthers, you have Proud Boys outside that courthouse. But if you're just looking at this and you're colorblind, I do think this was the just result. And the result would have been the same regardless of the race of the victim and the defendant, or at least it should have been.
We've been talking about how quickly things moved in reaching this verdict. Do you think the jury kind of was leaning one way all along, or was there maybe a turning point that caused them to ultimately decide that he's guilty?
I think this outcome was inevitable, regardless of who the jurors were. The conventional wisdom, again, is that not only does the defendant have to take the stand, but in most cases, jurors tend to deliberate. This is a rule of thumb, approximately 1 hour for each day of witness testimony. This was obviously much shorter than that, and it just goes to show how strong the prosecution's case was. Maybe there were 1 or 2 holdout jurors in the beginning, but the fact that you got to first-degree murder, not a compromise verdict here, not a mixed verdict on manslaughter, and you got there so quickly, leads me to believe that the vast majority of the jurors were decided even before closing arguments when they went into that jury deliberation room, because the deliberation was so short. Short verdict tends to either be a very strong prosecution case or a very strong defense case. And in this case, there was no doubt that this was a very strong and compelling prosecution case. And I know the defense will take his chance on appeal. And, the defense has also chosen to have the jury decide the sentence. Now, this is one thing that's unique about Texas, Anna, is defendants can choose to have a judge sentence them or a jury. This is not the case in most states. So right now, Carmelo Anthony's mom is, I believe, she's on the witness stand. She's testifying or about her son trying to really get a reduced sentence, because the range is very broad here. We're talking about anywhere from 5 years to 99 years. And it's very easy to say someone's guilty, but it's also very different to look them in the eye and look their family in the eye and sentence them to max them out. So it's going to be interesting to see what the jurors do. I do think he's probably going to get, decades in state prison, but I don't think he's going to get anywhere near the max. And for everyone that's talking about the death penalty, I just want folks to know the death penalty is not an option in this case. The prosecution didn't seek it. And generally, the Supreme Court has said that the death penalty is inappropriate for minors. And of course, Carmelo Anthony was, I believe, a minor at the time, even though he can be prosecuted as an adult under Texas state law.
And you talked about Carmelo Anthony's mother being on the witness stand. One thing that kind of stood out to me today was that the attorneys waived those opening statements in the punishment phase, and they went straight to that witness testimony. What does that tell you about the strategy of both sides? And is that an unusual thing in a case like this?
Well, I think the lawyers want to be respectful of the jurors. Sometimes the jurors don't necessarily know that there's going to be a second phase of the case, because obviously, if he were found to be not guilty, the jurors would not deliberate on punishment. So whether it's punishment or whether it is punitive damages, sometimes jurors don't necessarily know that there's going to be a second phase to the case. Sometimes the judge does tell them. But the reality here is it is a serious imposition on an individual's time to be seated as a juror, especially in a very serious case like this. There's people on all sides, on social media, traditional media. We've been covering it now for weeks, right? That have very strong views about this case. They're not deaf. They understand that there's people outside protesting.
All right, chat, real talk. Like, what y'all think? Y'all think this was the right situation? Y'all think he was guilty or not guilty? Like, tell me what y'all think. Cause now I'm kind of like, I'm in the middle. No, I ain't in the middle. Matter of fact, wrong is wrong. We all knew he killed dude. He said he killed dude. But I feel like, unalive dude. I feel like all he had to do is tell him like, all right, give me, let's work out a deal for third, you know what I'm saying? 3rd degree murder instead of 1st degree. first degree, that's life. You know what I'm saying? I feel like it was an accidental killing. He ain't do it on purpose. He just wanted to stab dude, get dude out the way because dude was on him. I don't feel like he really just wanted to just kill dude out there. You know what I'm saying? He ain't know him. He ain't know dude. He know Eddie. See, that's who really need to be. Eddie is the reason behind all this. Because if you know both people, if I know Karmelo and I know Lahoma, I should get in between like, hey, no, y'all shouldn't do all this. You know what I'm saying? Eddie don't say nothing, and he let them clash, and now dude, one passed away and one facing life. Well, damn about it, he got life because he got guilty, first degree murder. So it's like Eddie is a bad friend. He would say he was both of his friends. He said, I was really friends with him that passed away. And me and Karmelo, we was kind of cool. Bro, if that's kind of cool, you shouldn't let your kind of cool friend and your friend get into it. You in the middle. Whoever Eddie is, you a bitch. Yeah, man. Back to the video.
They've had their phones taken away from them. They can only communicate with family members in case it's an emergency. They're supposed to have no contact with the outside world. So now you're asking them to sit in judgment for additional days potentially to decide the punishment of this young man. And obviously that is a very important role that they play in our criminal justice system. But if you're the lawyers here, you really want to be sensitive to their time. What is going to be said in opening statement during the second phase of the case that they haven't already heard? You really want to start talking about those mitigating factors. You want to hear about Karmelo Anthony's upbringing, whether he was a good student, whether he lacked criminal history, whether he hasn't gotten in this trouble. So there's a lot of evidence that's going to come in that's relevant to sentencing that isn't necessarily relevant to guilt or innocence. So it does make sense to move forward. Let's hear from those sentencing witnesses, the family members of Anthony, obviously the victim's family, Metcalf's dad, I'm sure, is going to be testifying. If he hasn't already, he's made some statements to the media. Let's just get to the meat and potatoes and not waste the jurors' time anymore.
Navam, the #1 rated business travel platform, lets your team book work travel in one place. Flights, hotel.
And of course, as we know that Anthony could face anywhere from those 5 years to life in prison, how does that emotional testimony maybe impact the sentence that the jury might hand down and what they ultimately decide for him?
I mean, emotion has a huge role in this case, and I think anyone who's watching it knows that this was really an unnecessary tragedy. Obviously, Austin Metcalf lost his life, and he should not have. And, you know, you have this young man who is probably going to spend a significant portion or potentially most of his life in Texas State Prison. So there's certainly no winners here, even though the prosecution and the people of the state of Texas did win. This was a tragedy that could have been avoided. You know, it's an unnecessary fight over what, you know?
All right, let's go see what Charleston White said about this.
Believe it. I know that I'm chosen, but I still die for my brother. You better believe it. Yeah.